Alright, good evening ladies. In today's video we're going to be talking about potentially crypto's breakout technology, one of the most interesting use cases to ever come out of crypto in my opinion, and the first cycle where this technology or where this niche within crypto is really starting to hit a bit of mainstream adoption as well as really hitting the mainstream narrative. And of course that is Depin. I'm going to explain exactly why Depin is the sector that I'm paying possibly the most attention to right now, and one that I want to invest more of my own capital into. One of the most interesting use cases in my opinion, and I'm also going to share with you at the end of the video how to identify what is a good Depin investment. I'm going to give you all the things you should watch out for, or the things you should look out for when investing into a Depin project, because there's a billion different Depin projects now, and it's kind of hard to know, like from an investment perspective. Might be like easier to determine, is this actually useful for people, but that doesn't necessarily always mean the token is going to pump. So I'm going to share exactly how you can identify which tokens are going to pump in the Depin sector as well towards the end of the video. But first, like an overview of Depin. What is Depin and why is it so useful? It essentially allows you to crowdsource capex. So probably the best way to explain it is with some examples, like maybe mobile data. Instead of having to set up these huge cell towers all throughout a city, which would cost millions or hundreds of millions to set up a new mobile network, now instead you're decentralizing a mobile network by everyone getting these little nodes, sticking it in their house or sticking it on their business, on their shop, and providing that mobile data for a decentralized network. And then people can connect to this mobile network. So this is what Helium with mobile is doing. And it's a much cheaper way, and it's a much better way to organize it, because you can put this mobile data, you can incentivize people to put one of these nodes somewhere. Like, you can give better rewards if someone puts a node somewhere where there is no connectivity, as opposed to having to build a huge cell tower. But how do you actually get a decentralized network of nodes to do this? Well, obviously you're giving them token incentives to set this up. So you get rewarded the whatever Depin, in this case it would be mobile tokens, but whatever Depin coin, you're going to be getting those coins for providing that real world service. So it's actually providing a real world use case. And in order to access that product, you're going to have to essentially buy those tokens and burn those tokens a lot of the time. And you might not actually be doing this on the front end, but on the back end, that's what's happening. So there's an actual proper flywheel, there's an actual use case for the token. In almost all of these Depin projects, you actually need the token first to incentivize the build out of the real world use case. So with Depin, there's actual real world value being created, and there's actual real use case for the token. So that's why it's the two main reasons why it's so interesting, because you can't really build a Depin network without the token. Why not, you might be asking? Why can't I just incentivize people with Solana or with another cryptocurrency or with US dollars? Because that would just be the same as, you're going to need a huge amount of money to start this. So this is basically skipping the cold start problem when it comes to these kind of networks, where there's a huge amount of resources required to actually set up a network like this. So you can basically give people tokens that at the very start have no value, but people can see the vision and they're getting these tokens. And over time, as the network grows, those tokens are actually worth something, because it's a positive feedback loop, because they get those tokens, they're getting incentivized tokens, they might hold them, they might sell them, and then speculators come and invest and be like, oh, I see the vision here, I'm going to buy these tokens. And then, so usually how a Depin network starts is the supply is built out first with these network incentives, encouraging people to build out the network and build out the product and build out the supply side. In this case, we'll just continue using the example of a mobile data network. And then eventually people are like, okay, I can get unlimited broadband or unlimited data, unlimited text, unlimited calls for $20 a month using Helium. I'm going to actually buy that. I'm going to do that. They pay $20 a month, and then there's even more of an incentive to provide more nodes onto that network and make the network even stronger, because now there's actual demand coming in for this network, and on the back end those tokens are being burned. So it's a virtuous flywheel. As more participants join the network and provide the service gets better, the network gets better, like the Wi-Fi speed might get faster, and it might become cheaper and cheaper. So eventually more and more people come in, the demand side grows and grows and grows, which again makes more people want to join the network to earn those incentives. So it's a virtuous flywheel a lot of the time with Depin, and the token is actually very necessary for the entire process. So the other nice thing about Depin networks is, because we were providing real world products and providing a valuable service to people that's not directly tied to crypto, like it's not just directly tied to speculation. So the revenue for these Depin networks is coming from something tangible, whereas the revenue coming from a Uniswap or a decentralized exchange or Pump.Fun or an NFT marketplace, all of that revenue is coming from speculation, from people speculating on coins, from people speculating on JPEGs or whatever. So it's very, very, very much tied to the crypto ecosystem, and it's just essentially tied to speculation. There's nothing really super fundamental backing DEXs or NFT marketplaces, or most of the products in crypto are very much speculation based, whereas Depin the revenue is coming from something tangible and providing a real world value use case. A lot of these Depin projects are really trying to disrupt huge total addressable markets. And we know in crypto, people love to dream, people love to think, oh, what is the potential with this? If this replaces all mobile networks, how valuable could that be? So a lot of these products are actually going for these huge total addressable markets. And the other nice thing about Depin is that instead of, like, Web 2 very much consolidates power in big tech, or consolidates power into people who have billions and billions of dollars to be able to set up these networks in the first place, like build out these cell towers or build out Uber, and it's very much a consolidation of power into tech giants. Whereas with Depin, you're decentralizing that power. Anyone can earn from providing a service. Like any old Joe can just make a little bit of extra money during the month by providing a little bit of data, or providing a little bit of Wi-Fi, or providing a little bit of storage or energy or compute power. Depin has been actually the best performing sector in crypto over the last few months. When everything else has been going down, we've seen that Helium has actually been performing extremely well, and that's for a couple of reasons. They've kind of branched out from being just an IoT provider. That's kind of what they started as. Nodes for Internet of Things, and obviously Internet of Things hasn't really taken off yet, and now they're doing the mobile data thing, and they're eventually kind of looking to branch out into all, like, being a network for loads of different Depin projects and services. So that's why Helium, that coin, has been doing particularly well, and their mobile network is one of the first crypto products to really start hitting mass normie appeal. I think they have over 100,000 people using the Helium network, and it's $20 a month and you get unlimited everything. And I think most networks in America cost like $70 a month for everything. So it's obviously, like, it's not just slightly cheaper, it's like 3 times cheaper, which is, like, if something is just slightly cheaper and slightly better, usually it's not good enough to get a lot of people to switch over. But once it starts getting much, much cheaper, then people start getting interested in it. So, like, the Helium mobile network is one of the first examples of a fully fleshed out working product in the Depin space. But a lot of these Depin projects, they're just starting off. So only the supply side has been built out and the demand side hasn't really come in yet. And I think Helium as well is just starting with that, getting that demand side out. Like, a lot of these projects, like, the revenues in Depin are not extraordinary yet. Like, the decentralized storage plays and the decentralized compute plays, like Akash here, we can see the Akash revenue, which is a decentralized compute network. Its revenue is growing a lot, but it's still minuscule. $3,000 a day, which is like $1 million of revenue per year. Like, it's not huge by any stretch of the imagination. Not every niche within the Depin niche itself is potentially the best investment. So decentralized compute we'll discuss a bit later. But as we can see, Helium, with this mobile network, with this mobile data, we can see how much coins, how much value they've burnt from providing this service. And the yellow is the mobile token, and the green is the IoT token, which was their original product. And as you can see, mobile has completely eclipsed the original IoT product. And I think this all then goes and burns the HNT token, which is the main token for the Helium network. And there's two major US carriers that are offloading some of their requirements onto the Helium network, like I don't know, maybe T-Mobile or one of them. So they're using Helium already, and there's also a lot of individuals using the Helium mobile network. So connectivity, which would be the likes of mobile data, there's a lot of Depin projects within this sector, but this seems to be one of the first ones, the lowest hanging fruit for Depin. And Helium has been around since 2017, I think, so it's been around for a long time. And yeah, it's finally starting to hit critical mass. It's finally really starting to hit product market fit, and it's the biggest Depin project at the moment. And the nice thing about Helium, like I kind of mentioned this earlier, but this applies to a lot of Depin projects, is that they can selectively incentivize, say there's a certain area within New York that there's a lot of foot traffic but not a lot of coverage. They can give extra incentives for people to put a node up there. So you can't really do that with a Web2 cell tower. Like, that takes millions and millions of dollars, and can't just do it within a couple of days. So there are really strong advantages for Helium and for connectivity Depin sector. So right now the supply side has been fleshed out for a lot of these Depin networks, because you're incentivizing people to supply the service, whether it's mapping data, whether it's compute power, etc., etc. There is plenty of incentive for people to give that supply. However, Helium is one of the only projects that's really seen a lot of demand for this supply so far. Let's talk about some other sectors and niches. Another interesting niche within Depin are decentralized sensor networks. So an example of this, these are basically networks that gather data and sell that data on to whatever party would want that data. So an example which I've done a video on before, so if you want to dive deep into this project, you can watch that video, because it's a very interesting project in my opinion, and that's Hive Mapper. And that's essentially, people stick a little camera on their car, and as they're driving, say they're an Uber driver that drives a lot, that's gathering data. So it's taking pictures and it's mapping, like giving really up-to-date fresh maps of a certain area, and you're getting rewarded tokens for doing that. Now, Uber pays Google like 10 billion, some outrageous figure per year, to get access to their Google Maps. And Hive Mapper is providing a way more up-to-date mapping service. So there's a lot of potential clients that could use this sort of mapping data. So that's what a sensor network is. Now, as I said, the supply side is growing. It's growing very, very fast, but the demand side isn't fully fleshed out yet. So it's still in its early stage, and we need to see if people are actually going to use this data yet. Another example would be Grass, which I talked about a bit, which is you sell your excess bandwidth on your broadband. So when you're browsing the internet and there's extra bandwidth not being used, Grass is essentially selling that bandwidth for AI companies to scrape the internet and gather more data. So also a really, really interesting project, and which is in the AI and Depin sectors. So potentially going to be a very interesting launch once it launches very, very soon. So I'm keeping an eye on that one. And if you've been following my videos for a while, you'll also be getting that airdrop for providing that service, which was super easy to do. For example, in the sensor network would be GeoDNet, and that's for GPS services. I think it's accurate to within 10 centimeters, whereas most GPS services are accurate within 2 meters. So it's a way more accurate GPS network, and similar concept. People are providing this data for the GPS network. just a few more examples in the connectivity niche, the same one that Helium is in. You have decentralized Wi-Fi, DY. So this is Wi-Fi for $20 a month, as opposed to $140 a month most people pay in America. There's Dawn, decentralized broadband. People provide their excess internet connectivity, and they sell the excess supply to a communal network, and you can see a little graph of it here. The thing about decentralized broadband is the cost to the network isn't in the bandwidth, it's in the actual infrastructure. So the excess bandwidth essentially is being unused. It's essentially free, like it can be used by someone else, and like there's no extra cost to anyone if someone uses that. Essentially it's the infrastructure, setting up the infrastructure in the first place, that the original people have done, the internet service providers. That's where the costs come from. So the excess broadband, which is being unused, if you can sell that, that's great. That's what Dawn is doing. Now, the problem with a couple of these, like Grass and with Dawn, a lot of these ISPs, internet service providers, don't allow people to sell excess broadband or excess Wi-Fi or anything like that. So it's still in a legal gray zone. So this might get shut down, but it's just something that you're aware of. Like, it's not fully fleshed out yet, but I just wanted to be here of the different kind of services and the different kind of projects people are looking into in the Depin network, so you kind of have an idea of how useful it is. The decentralized physical resources, so decentralized storage, we've talked about that before. Now, the problem with decentralized storage and decentralized compute, we've talked about extensively. I've done a video on decentralized compute, which is the best decentralized compute network. If you want to watch that video, there's a couple of issues with decentralized compute in the first place. In order for, like, the idea behind this was that people will sell their excess compute power to a grid or to a network, and like idle compute power, like their graphics card for their gaming console or whatever, might as well sell that, and people can run AI models using that compute, because, you know, we're so compute constrained at the moment because all the big tech companies want compute for their AI models to train AI or for inference for AI as well. So there's not enough compute to go around at the moment, and that's why Nvidia is going to the moon. So that's why those render, cache, and what's the other one? Whichever the other one is, I forget off the top of my head. That's why they've been performing so well, or Nasana. So that's all very well and good, but the issue is, like, in order to train these like really highly complex AI models, you need like a cluster of extremely powerful H100s Nvidia chips. So like a spare compute graphics card isn't going to be able to train the models. So like I'm not as bullish on that sector as I originally was, because I know IONET are kind of trying to tackle this by creating these clusters of Nvidia chips. And the other problem is, like, it's not so, it sounds really good, but it's not much cheaper than the original incumbents. Yeah, it's cheaper. We can see it from here. That's a little bit cheaper, but there's new incumbents coming in, like Vest AI, and they're offering compute for pretty cheap prices as well, like almost on the same order of magnitude as a cache. So obviously Amazon Web Services is $5, a cache is $1, so way cheaper for this compute per hour. However, Vest AI, all these like smaller incumbents in like the Web 2 space that aren't using a decentralized network, are offering similar prices. So generally for people to switch over, like, there's all these regulatory issues, and you need, like, there is some advantages to the decentralized compute, but at the same time, is it enough to bring people over from Web 2? We haven't seen that yet, and it's kind of the same with decentralized storage as well. It's not much cheaper just yet, so we have to wait and see how those, like, they were really hyped maybe 6 months ago, but potentially they're not the lowest hanging fruit with Depin, and I'm looking more at connectivity and sensor data, the ones we're talking about already, like providing data, like HiveMapper providing the mapping data, and there's a load of different sensor network data providers which are really, really interesting. But the demand side hasn't come out for that yet. But the connectivity one, also very, very interesting. And HNT being the biggest Depin play, and it's performing so well. I have been adding to that position personally. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you how to actually invest in the Depin niche. If you want to invest in the Depin niche, what you need to look out for. But say you don't want to invest in individual products in the Depin space. You're kind of like, okay, there's so many different projects, which is very fair, and I don't know which one's going to get the most real world users and which one is going to provide the most value and all of this kind of thing. It's very new. It hasn't been fleshed out yet, which is 100% true. But a lot of these Depin networks are being built on Solana, and maybe some on Ethereum, but not really. So a way to kind of get broad exposure to the Depin space is with Solana. Now, obviously, Solana, like, market cap isn't going to go 20x or something. So, and it's probably only going to, like, the gains from Depin on Solana are probably only going to affect it like maybe a max of like 30%. Like, what I mean is that the value of Solana isn't 100% tied to the value of Depin. Like, there's a lot of other things that have propped up the value of Solana. So, you know, it's not a perfect way to invest in it, but obviously it's very bullish for Solana in the fact that a lot of these Depin networks have bridged or have set up on Solana. So that's why one of the reasons that I'm still very bullish on Solana, my biggest holding for the cycle, and I'm going to leave it that way because I'm very, very bullish on Depin. If you haven't realized by this time, very bullish on Depin, and I think that will help the price of Solana. However, there's other new networks that are coming out that are actually going to be layer ones that are specifically designed for Depin networks. So Peak is one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. It's not out yet, but it's 100% designed for Depin, and what Depin needs is really low transaction costs because there's going to be a lot of transactions and really, really fast transaction speeds as well, obviously. And obviously you want decentralization and everything else that goes with it. Some information about Peak: 100k transactions per second, so very performant blockchain. And another one that's coming out is IoTex. So I am keeping an eye on this. I might do a video on Peak by itself once I've done a bit more research, because it's not even out yet, so there's no crazy rush to get in on it. But yeah, that's a way to get a kind of a more broad exposure. So if you want the kind of lower risk way to get exposure to Depin, you could look at Solana. And then a little bit riskier would be the Helium token, the HNT token, because that's kind of the market leader for Depin, in my opinion. I know there's Filecoin, I think, has a bigger market cap, but I personally back Helium to be the main Depin player. I think it should outperform because storage isn't as interesting as Helium, in my opinion. And if you do want to invest in individual products, here are the points that you want to look out for. So first, is it providing something very useful to an end user? Is it providing real useful data? Is it providing a real useful service? Okay, example of a useful product is it's bringing connectivity to a place that didn't have connection before, that a Web2 company, that a traditional company couldn't bring connectivity to. That would be an example of real use case that a Web2 incumbent couldn't really provide. And it's not just providing a small cost advantage. If there's a cost advantage to using a Depin network, it's going to have to be really, really like much cheaper to get people to switch over. Like a lot of big companies, they have their compute storage, they have their compute and storage providers. They already have good relationships with them, and you know, everything's kind of set up easily. There's highly regulated. It's all working well. So to get them to switch for 20% cheaper when it's not a huge, potentially not a huge part of their budget anyway, it's probably not going to happen unless it's like much cheaper and it's really going to affect their bottom line or make things more streamlined or just be a better product overall. So cost advantage has to be significant, or it has to be way faster. Like, say the internet using decentralized broadband or whatever, say it's way faster, the download speed is much better and it's much cheaper. Then at that point you could see, okay, maybe people be willing to switch because Everyone wants faster Wi-Fi. Okay, obviously you want a good product that's going to attract users. But if the tokenomics are garbage, then the token isn't going to be worth investing in. So what you need is a real demand sink. So you want anyone who is using the product on the back end, some tokens are either being burnt or needed to be staked, or some sort of mechanism where there is a demand for the token at the back end. Like I know with the Helium mobile network, you're paying $20 a month, and that $20 is then converted into the mobile tokens and burned. So that's essentially how it's working. So the end user has no idea it's crypto and no need for it to be crypto. But on the back end, there has to be a mechanism that either burns or forces you to stake tokens or something like that. So there has to be an actual demand for the token. Otherwise, the token will just inflate to infinity, So a lot of these Depin networks are well aware of this though. And there is a good positive feedback loops with most of them. The final point on what to look out for that helps a Depin project perform well is if they're able to we talked about this a minute ago, but incentivize higher value supply. So people who are providing more useful data or providing connectivity in a less connected place, they're getting outsized returns and they're getting better incentives for doing that. So if your project or the project that you're looking into is able to incentivize what they need and what they want more, that's a good thing to look out for as well, because Web 2 incumbents can't do that. So I do think Depin is going to be one of the best performing sectors in the cycle. We can see it's kind of very recently it's been performing quite well, and that's mostly on the back of Helium. Over the last few months it's been performing quite well, kind of in line with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and not as well as Solana. But yeah, I do think once crypto really starts taking off, Depin is going to be one of the most interesting sectors. The reason being is it's very normie friendly, it's very easy to understand, and normies are definitely going to want to earn money through crypto by providing these services. And in the fact that them doing that, because that they're doing that, these networks are actually going to be quite valuable. The data that these networks are providing, or the resources that these networks are providing, are going to be valuable. So users are going to come, in my opinion. So that's a very deep dive onto Depin. I'm going to do Depin coins ranked from best to worst soon. So if you want to see that video, make sure you're subscribed. And yeah, really hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one. Cheers.